So I will start by introducing you to Kesha Fisher. All right. So one exciting thing about Kesha, and something we're very proud about, is that she took classes at PCC a few years ago. And actually the story that she'll be reading for you tonight, she can tell you a little bit more about it, but the story that she will be reading for you tonight is an extension of a story you wrote for the magazine, I believe.
And No God Like the Mother. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Yes.
Please do. Welcome. All right. So a PCC alumnus, novelist Kesha Ajose Fisher won the 2020 Oregon Book Award for Fiction for her debut collection, No God Like the Mother. Kesha is dedicated to amplifying the voices of some of the most vulnerable members of our society. She knows that many of life's burdens fall heaviest on the shoulders of women, and she seeks to expose this reality in her writing. And that's a direct quote from her website. She was born in Chicago, raised in Lagos, Nigeria, and now lives in Oregon with her family, and can be found writing, reading, cooking for friends and family, raising her babies, cuddling with her puppy Oscar, and fighting for social justice for the most vulnerable members of our society. And she just presented at the Oregon Book Awards a couple of weeks ago, where we got to see her host the whole thing, and it was great, and she was wonderful. So join me in welcoming Kesha Fisher to read for us tonight. Thank you so much, Kesha.
All right. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thanks for having me. I want to start by saying, Van, it's so good to see you here. I'd written No God Like the Mother in 2019, and I wasn't sure what was going to happen. In fact, Van was probably the first person to invite me to come talk about this book. And I'm sure I came in and said, oh, nothing will come of it. I'm excited that anyone wanted to publish anything that I'd written. And then, I was a finalist. And I was then invited back to one of your classes, Van, at PCC, to discuss some of the stories in the book, which again blew my mind that anyone even wanted to talk to me about this book. And a suggestion during that event was about one of the stories in No God Like the Mother, titled Nobody's Child, the story of a teenage mom and the relationship between her mother and her child, and a rather sad discovery that she makes at the end of the story. But a suggestion was made that the person reading it wished the story went on, and they wanted to know more about what happened to these people. And you know how sometimes you write something and you go back to read it and there's always something missing. I don't think I've ever read anything I've written and felt it was complete. So when I was able to submit again to the Alchemy, I thought what a great opportunity to continue that story in some form. And so the story that I'm reading tonight, Carrying Water, is an extension of sorts from the ending of Nobody's Child. And I should say, in a lot of my writing, I use what is called Pidgin English, but it's broken English, form of English that we spoke when I lived in Nigeria. We weren't allowed to speak our tribal languages in school. You were essentially, punished for speaking your language at school, but you could speak English or broken English. And I thought I would write the story entirely in broken English. And this is what I came up with. Okay, I'm sure I've eaten all of my 20 minutes. Okay, so this is Carrying Water. She say, I am a witch, a devil, a bad guy. everything under the sun except a child of God. Eh? Okay. By the time I finish tell you, you will know true evil. You will know. You will see how I enter hell and come out smiling. You will see. Our relationship is not the only thing that died the day my daughter break my heart. Oh no. I know what she tell you. She is believable too, Sha. Probably pouring her tears on top of the same fire she herself make. You feel her pain too, don't you? You must do. When she say that me, Ronke, Marianne Thomas, I am the worst mother, the kind of mother who abandons her one and only child. I should tell you that this is easy to believe. I'm sorry, I should tell you that it is easy to believe the sun is gone forever if all you see is cloud. So let me clear it. I did not abandon my child. I did not. I did not do it in Nigeria and not here in America. They send you to prison for that, no? I was watching the Oprah when a woman say something like about the way past trauma affect our adulthood. You understand? She say, it's not your fault if trouble follow you from when you're young. She say, and even if trauma passed you and you survive, one day it will catch you, Sha. And then you will have to answer. She is correct about that. You will have to answer on this earth or when you stand before the Father God above. Shebi, I was a small girl too now, long ago. My childhood was moving like slow. I live inside a tarpaulin covered hut in a small village where nothing ever happened. Day comes after night and rainy season follow dry season. And in between, waiting for one or the other to come back, we work. No one know or care what happened on the other side of the forest, not the women anyway. They too busy working, doing this and that, taking care of husband, children, goats, farm, life. My mama was the youngest wife after the 3 witches Baba already claimed. In their compound, Baba gets his own hut. Each wife gets her own too. All their huts built with strong stone wall and strong roof to live with their children. When my mama come, they give her hut with hole inside ceiling. She born me inside this hut, and every day, no matter what I'm doing, she say, why are you playing? Go find stick. Why are you sitting? Go find leaves. Are you awake? Go find branch. All the days, she wanting me to collect anything to plug the hole, make rain stop falling for our head. She said it in front of the witches, so they see I am not lazy. My mama work like Omodo, I tell you, Sha, like she is servant and not one of Baba's wives. Come day, she go to river, return, cook, wash clothes and children, her own and the other ones. She clean the compound, go back to fetch more water. Then she walk back home. When night come, she tired so much, Sha. She don't ask me to help her, never. Because she born me with soft bone. She fear I break. So she give me small work for finding plug for ceiling only. When I say I want to help her with big work, she always saying, no, Ronke, I can do it by myself. Hear me when I say all I ever pray from God is to give me power for make my mama's life simple. I am 8, 9 years. One day when my mama carry bucket for going to the river, I carry her second bucket. Mama, I'm going to help, I say. She laugh at me. Small girl, what can you do? I beg, and finally she say yes. The bucket so full, it sit on top of my head like heaven is pressing me inside ground. Laura, be careful, my mama is saying. Yes, ma, I say to her. My legs are shaking and paining, feeling like say they will shatter if I don't sit down. Inside my chest, I am feeling like warm, proud I can help my mama. We near the compound and people are clapping for me and I am smiling and my mama is saying, no, mind them, carry your water, go inside. I see the boy, Wale. He is clapping at me and smiling at me. I try show him my own smile and the bucket fall, wash the happy come out from my face. Forgive me, mama, I keep saying, and her eyes smile like, no wahala, it's no problem. Mistake can happen for anyone. She put down her buckets and come to me. She is kneeling down by me. She put her hand on top of my shoulder, her eyes shining at me, smiling at me. She is making me feel warm inside my chest. The other wives, true witches, were seeing us and saying to my mama, Oti ba moyeje, you have spoiled her. They're saying, why my mama wait 8 years for teach me to fetch water? Oti baje, they say, she has spoiled. My mama's hand, smooth like banana skin, leave my shoulder. Her eyes don't shine no more, and her eyes don't smile no more, and the warm in my inside disappear. Mama is walking away from me, but the witches are shouting, Oti ba moyeje, Oti ba moyeje. I am sitting on the ground, wet as the soul of a fish, when I see my mama come back to me. I raise up my hands, cry, pick me, mama, but she don't lift me. Her hand come down, slap my leg. I scream. The witches are saying, good, good, finally. My mama slapped my arm, my mouth, top of my head. Ah, Jesus, I don't stop screaming. The more I scream, the more her hand is paining me, Sha. But she keeps saying to me, next time, watch what you are going. I don't tell you that so for pitying me. Look at my life, house, car, good job inside America. I am fine. You know that woman on the Oprah will say, I am traumatized because my mama beat me, but she don't understand. You see, she don't know, say beating come with Nigerian upbringing. It is like somebody say, here, child, here are your parents, roof, food, clothes, and here, take your beating too. Sometimes the other things not guarantee, but beating in life guarantee. It is cuckoo the way. How will children know respect? How? But I swear, I never beat your mother. I never beat my Josephine. I know the witches will say, maybe if I take my mama's lesson and beat my child, she would never embarrass me like she do. But I will tell you why I choose never beat my child. After my mama beat me that day, she looked at me like I am not her daughter, like I am not her anything. Then my mama looked at her hands. Then I see my mama come start crying herself. The witches surround my mama like teeth around tongue, say she is mad woman, crying for no reason. My mama don't say nothing. She cuckoo carry me from ground and she cuckoo take me behind the hut and she cuckoo wash me. One day when I am 10 years and Wale is the same years, curiosity disease catch him. We all of us watch him run across the river. He enter the bush and disappear. I pray for his safe return. We all of us pray, but the fear he leave behind, it is too much to bear. His own mama cry and beg God day and night until God's hand come down and snatch the sound from her chest. My own mama say, it is good the woman die. I ask her, why mama? She tell me, never leave her to carry that kind of pain. She say I should kill her first before I leave her inside life without her child. She say, because she loved me too much. I ask my mama, if you love me, why you beat me? She say, daughters supposed to come make life easy for their mama. She say, sorry, her shame is too much big on that day. She says, shame is worse than death. Death, you finish, you go. Shame, you carry. Maybe because she carries shame for borning me, her only child, with soft bone, is why she allow river carry her go, finish. Maybe. I beg God, please, make my life simple with no shame. I'll pause it there. Thank you so much for this opportunity to read and share with you today.
Thank you so much, Kesha.
All right.
And everybody, if you want to take off your mic for a second and say thank you to Kesha, or take
Thank you.
and you can also add something in the chat there.
That was incredible.
That was wonderful.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was wonderful.
All right. Well, thank you, and save up your questions for Kesha as well. You'll be able to ask some questions of Kesha at the end. So save those up, and then I'll have you put them in the chat at the end. So thank you again, Kesha. Okay, next up we have another Oregon Book Award winner. I love that you two won the Oregon Book Award in sequential years. And this is Vanessa Veselka. All right, so Vanessa Veselka has been, and I love this part of your bio, Vanessa, has been at various times a teenage runaway, a sex worker, a musician, a union organizer, and a student of paleontology. I'd love to hear a story about that, by the way. She is the author of the 2020 novel, The Great Offshore Grounds, which won the Oregon Book Award and was longlisted for the U.S. National Book Award, as well as the Penn Robert W. Bingham Prize for the novel Zazen. And her nonfiction has appeared in Salon, The Atlantic, and GQ. In 2013, she was chosen as a McDowell Fellow, and her November 2012 GQ piece entitled The Truck Stop Killer is part of the 2013 edition of Best American Essays, and it's such a pleasure to have you. And you're reading from the office in the East Wing, which is actually my favorite room in the whole house. It looks over the orchards, so I'm glad you chose this room. There it is, the orchard out the windows. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, Vanessa, and I'll hand it over to you.
Hi, Justin. Thanks, everybody. And I wish I was going to read something brand new, but I'm actually going to read from the last novel because I'm in the middle of writing something new, and I'm just not in a place to read it yet because I put a lot of privacy around when I'm in the writing process, just not trying to sort of like, it would mean I would be trying to pull things together and sort of dust them off and brush them up and cut them into things and present. And I'm not in the presenting stage. So I hope you'll bear with me. I'm going to read from the novel that came out a year and a half ago-ish. And I wanted to say, but I'm going to jump around a little bit. And one of the reasons I'm going to do it is, one of the things that Kesha and I both have done is we've both worked with different populations or been a part of different populations at different times that, have social justice issues. I write a lot more about class, and it shows up in this novel in different ways. And so I'm going to jump around in women's health, obviously a big topic right now. So I'm going to jump around in a couple places to just sort of do some character sketch stuff, just because. But first I'm going to orient by reading the beginning or part of the beginning. So, okay, I usually stand and pace, so I'm going to try to sit down here. 15 miles south of Seattle and halfway across Puget Sound to the west is Maury Island. Shaped like an arrowhead aimed at the mainland, green is the inner fold of a grass blade. It can be seen from the air, cradled in the crook of an elbow of water. Tourists ride over in ferries to watch for whales and UFOs. Jets turn around overhead on their final approach to the airport. Even on days when there is no rain, mist filters through the evergreens until it pulls apart like threadbare cloth and burns off. The wedding was to be held in the afternoon at Point Robinson, the site of an old fog signal station that once housed a steam whistle fed by coal fire and water to warn away ships. In 1897, at the dawn of massive capital expansion and speculation, the whistle sounded for 528 hours, nearly killing the man who had to shovel the 35 tons of coal. The cargo had to be kept from the rocks. Who can halt the lumbering desires of the world? In 1915, the lighthouse with its state-of-the-art fifth-order Fresnel lens was built. Powered initially by oil vapor lamps, its big beacon could be seen for 12 miles. The lens was a perfect manifestation of Victorian technology, replacing simple flat lenses with faceted crystal domes, prisms cut into tiers that made it both astonishingly beautiful and a breakthrough in optics. The Fresnel lens had a theoretically infinite capacity to capture diffuse light and, by way of internal reflection, cast it like a spear through darkness. It lit stages in celluloid, Polaroid shots, and retinas for ID scans. And on Point Robinson, it lit Puget Sound. Back across the Sound in Seattle, Livy looked out of her window of her basement apartment. Her father was getting married that afternoon, and though it was already late April, a cold, wet breeze still whistled through the gaps in the caulking, turning her skin to goose flesh. A few feet away stood her sister, Cheyenne, poorly slept, but already dressed. "I'm freezing," said Cheyenne. "I'm turning on the space heater." "Turn on the oven. They charge us for electricity," said Livy. Cheyenne rolled her eyes, but went over to the little white gas stove. Cranking the temperature to broil, she leaned back against the oven door so she could feel the heat on her hamstrings while the oven warmed. Yesterday, she'd spent nearly the whole day picking rocks out of Livy's landlord's garden in trade for a patch of soil near the sunny side of the fence so that Livy could grow food. It wasn't political. Livy didn't care about pesticides or permaculture. She was just the cheapest person Cheyenne had ever known. She lived off past state groceries. She washed her clothes once a month in a teaspoon of dish soap in a tub. She made her own bras. Cheyenne was pretty sure she would have rinsed and reused dental dams if she thought it would work. Recently, she had become, Livy, convinced that she could feed herself off 3 square yards of land, and though it was ridiculous, Cheyenne had moved in on her, appearing out of nowhere, without warning or rent, so she didn't have much of a say. Taller and unfreckled, Cheyenne had chosen a rose-colored cap sleeve shirt with eyelets and a pair of black pinstripe pants, suit pants. She could pass in the crowd they'd be in today. Her secondhand clothes would come off as vintage. Her misadventures in body art would make her seem a fine vase, badly cracked and chipping, but a gritty accent to any room. "Cyril didn't come to my wedding," Cheyenne said. "Why should we go to his?" "Did you invite him?" asked Livy. "Hell no, he would have arrived like a lord and expected to walk me down the aisle. Here, let me give you away." "Oh, hey, Dad, I'm pretty sure you did it." "You're right," she said, "he would have." "So why are we going?" said Cheyenne. "I have a day off work and it's cheaper than a movie. I'm tired of ramen and hot dogs and there'll be rich people food, so I'm taking Tupperware." "Please don't make it obvious," said Cheyenne. "We're already going to look out of place." "Oh, because you have jailhouse tattoos of hearts and clubs on your knuckles, or because I don't shave and look like a landscaper?" Cheyenne spread the fingers of her left hand. "Not just clubs and hearts. You just can't tell anymore." Livy crossed to the bed where she'd laid out her newly washed blue painter's pants and pulled them on over her long johns. "I'm going to the wedding because it's a show of support that costs me nothing. I've never thought of him as a dad and I don't care. At his worst, he's a big blank, a disappointment. He gets a clean slate. That's my wedding present, a pass. It's the only decent move." "I shot my better angels," said Cheyenne. "They're angels, you can't kill them. If they were real, you could." Sorry, I lost a screen there. Livy could feel Cheyenne's eyes burning holes in her ribs. She looked at her zipper and her fly, the flattened pocket, and flattened her pockets. "I have clothes if you want to borrow something," said Cheyenne. And Livy froze for a second, bent down, rolled the cuffs, making sure that each were perfectly even on both sides. "I have a white shirt. It has buttons. I can tuck it in. It's good enough for this." "We should at least get drunk before we go. I'd rather do it on his time." "I'll bet inviting us isn't even his idea," Livy smiled. "Well, maybe he has cancer and his doctor warned him that guilt suppresses the immune system." Cheyenne propelled herself off the stove with the back foot. "Yes, no," she said. "Wait, maybe I have it. He found God and God said unto him," she threw her arms wide and boomed, "Stop being such a dick, good dick, good dick." Echo. Neither sister had seen their father since they were 14. The wedding invitation had arrived only 2 weeks before the date of the ceremony, just on the heels of Cheyenne's reappearance. It was obvious from the short window that the decision to include them was at best the result of a long debate, or at worst, an afterthought. Their initial instinct had been to ignore it, and the invitation was repurposed. But in the end, they could not ignore it. It tapped at a hidden door. Shh. He's a king in a castle. He's only stashed us away in a village to keep us safe, and someday he will claim us and make everything all right. So before I go into the next section, because I'm going to skip over some of the setup for this, you know, the mother has raised the two of them alone. She was a teenager who got pregnant and in kind of an unusual situation. And the father is made a lot of money, but never had anything to do with them. And they've been suddenly invited to his wedding because he says he has a gift for them. That's sort of the setup. As girls, they had been fed the fairy tale. Two women loved the same man. One woman wanted a baby and the other wanted the North Star. Each woman became pregnant, so they made a plan. The one who wanted the baby would take both children, and the one who wanted the North Star would continue on. The first mother was happy and the second mother was happy. But which daughter was which? It drove Livy and Cheyenne fucking batshit crazy. Kirsten had never, that's her mother, given a name or a way to reach the other woman. She refused to say which girl belonged to which mother, and Livy and Cheyenne had never been able to figure it out. Each sister had Kirsten's black hair and mannerisms, her broad shoulders, but so did a lot of people. Mostly they looked like their father, Cyril. Every now and then, though, one sister would see something in the other and think that's totally her mouth, but then they could never be certain. Paperwork didn't clarify anything. Theirs was a home birth, and Kirsten was listed as the mother on both birth certificates. When they finally got the real story, it didn't help because it wasn't much different. Kirsten met Cyril when they were in grad school. They had an open relationship. Then Cyril fell in love with a girl who was new to town. The girl and Kirsten became friends. Not long afterward, both women got pregnant. And since one was ready for a baby and one was not, they struck a deal over a bottle of wine and some tosses of the I Ching. One woman became a mother of two girls. The other became a Buddhist nun. Cyril, not as much of a polyamorous adventurer as he originally thought, didn't stick around, and Kirsten raised the girls herself. I'm going to read some sections tonight that I don't usually read about Kirsten, who is the mother in this. She doesn't take up an enormous amount of page space, but I feel like with women's health, with everything else, I don't know, I just really wanted to read some of her sections tonight. So I'm going to start with this one, 1040 EZ. Kirsten, nocturnal as she was, rarely woke before 4 p.m. If she did, it was for administrative reasons, DMV lines, unpayable bills, courthouses, community college. She preferred these things to come at her half asleep so she could protect the best of herself for later, because at night she had a shining diamond mind. She had come home from meeting with Livy and began to work through her list of chores, but then stopped in the middle. She was anxious and hadn't known it. The day had a haze to it. It felt like a future memory, with each moment framed, like she wasn't there, but already looking back at it. It was a natural step from that feeling and that realization to what was bothering her and the other mother. Kirsten pulled a box out of the closet, and beneath 10 years of 1040 EZ, she found her earliest journals and brought them to the kitchen table. On top was her first. It had a denim cover with a gnome, and at the bottom she had carved the words "Food is evil, sleep is for losers" right onto the cover. She had written it back when she was starving herself and living on Pop-Tarts cut in tiny little squares. It was written the summer that she met Margaret, a public health nurse and a midwife from Boston. 15-year-old Kirsten had walked into Planned Parenthood looking for birth control. Too skinny, stripping her hair black to frosted blonde, worried about that the pill would make her fat, and frustrated by slipping diaphragms, creeped out by the sponge, sick of condoms, she got on the table and demanded that Margaret give her something better, as if it were the nurse's fault. Margaret started listing the options, but Kirsten did not like what she was hearing. "This sucks," she said, jumping off the examining table. "No wonder people just pull out." "Oh, well, what do you call people who pull out, who use the withdrawal method?" asked Margaret. Kirsten glowered. "Parents." "Heterosexual," said Margaret. Kirsten looked at her, but Margaret remained straight-faced. "Fuck, I wish I was gay," said Kirsten. "Well, if you're dead set against condoms, you could try cervical caps. It's no protection against STDs, but it works well if you do it right, and it's smaller than a diaphragm. Most women are just too chicken to touch themselves." They'd rather poison their bodies, but you're not chicken, are you? Kirsten tried to figure out if it was more pathetic to be proved a coward or to get goaded into something because someone calls you one. She pulled her pants off and lay back on the table, and Margaret measured her cervix. Pulling a latex cup out of a box, she showed Kirsten how to get it up inside her and get the suction right. We'll have to order the cap. It'll take a few weeks. On the way out, Margaret grabbed some granola bars from the basket in the break room and she shoved them into Kirsten's hands. The man wants you too thin to act, too thin to think. It's hard to overestimate the impact of meeting someone who is truly free. Pre-Margaret, Kirsten felt flat. Everything washed in pastel, the hideous institutional color palette of the day, baby blue, peach, coral, salmon, pale aqua, taupe. After Margaret, everything began to change. Over their next few appointments, she worked on Kirsten like a fucking glorious unicorn of feminism. She came at Kirsten with everything she had, and in one summer, she freed Kirsten from nearly every cultural bind. It was a radical form of rare magic. And I'm moving ahead. So this is also Kirsten. I never get to read all her parts together. They're all sort of sprinkled in through things. So thanks for being patient. The morning that the girls left, after the girls left for Boston, Kirsten stalked her room in her cornflower slip with her hair pinned to a knot by a chopstick before sitting back down at the kitchen table. What did she know about Anne anyway? That's the other mother. Even if she'd wanted to tell the girls what she knew Anne was still a Buddhist, but not what kind. She knew Anne traveled extensively, but not how. Perhaps she had married well or come into money. It was also possible that cut away from children and the needs to shell out cash for a 2-bedroom apartment for 20 years, Anne had simply floated upward in the realm of home ownership and 401ks, healthcare, and cars with airbags. Kirsten looked back at her laptop, where several windows were open. All healthcare plans, and none of them worth a shit. But she was tired of getting bounced on and off Medicaid every time assholes in the legislature decided to redefine poor. Normally, she could weather tides of eligibility, but not this time. Something was wrong and she didn't know what. Her stomach hurt. Her appetite flagged. She'd gone for her annual at the women's clinic and everything seemed fine, but she knew her body well enough to know that there was a change. She went to the tarot cards and did a few readings. She got the Lovers and the Star in the Universe, and who doesn't really want that? And then she clicked through the benefits of each plan. She clicked through the benefits of each plan. Any pre-existing conditions? Oh, I don't know. How about capitalism? So here she was, wide awake in the blazing daytime, having scrolled through online postings and now sitting with the nickel ads flayed to the classifieds looking for a job. Because you can't just call anymore. That's a flag. You can't ask a reasonable question like what shift or how much an hour. That's a flag. You can't even walk in and fill out an application. Everyone wants a resume. Whore out your personal charm just to wash dishes. Quote, a flexible team player with experience and a positive attitude wanting to move ahead, end quote. She annotated in her mind. Flexible, she crossed out. No boundaries, no kids. Experienced, she crossed out. Needs no training. Positive attitude, she crossed out. Obsequious yet entertaining. Wants to move ahead, she crossed out. In responsibility but not pay. For years, Kirsten had made her own deal with the government. I fill out paperwork, you give me money to live on. It was an honest paycheck, in her opinion, a reallocation of federal funds to support the work they should be doing and weren't. How many nights had she spent on the suicide hotlines talking someone off the edge? The number of times she'd opened up for the early shift at the domestic violence center. Every night she showed up reliably alive, not dulled by meaningless jobs. She met the messed up world intact and offered it in all hours humanity. The government had gotten more than its money worth. They were fucking lucky. They were fucking lucky. I only charged them food and $8.50 a month. But none of it looked real on paper. She closed the nickel ads. If you were over 25 and looking for a job, everyone expected a pageant of humiliation and a damn good story. Are you a recovering addict? Are you married to a bride hoarder? Are you a homemaker new to the market with an autistic son or a husband with cancer? Tell me, no, really tell me, what exactly is your excuse for being 52 and broke? It's not like she didn't know how to weather the opinions of others. A mom of 2 toddlers at 20, living off food stamps, she was used to scouring glance. In the DHS office, when the girls crawled on the floor and then ran wild over the seats, then squirmed and fought and yanked hanks of hair out of each other's heads. If she ignored it, she got told off for not disciplining them. If she yelled at them, she got told she was abusive. And both girls were hard in their own way. Cheyenne was a danger to herself in public. Libby was a danger to herself in private. She was unreadable when you most needed to read her, whereas Cheyenne would tell you point blank every shitty thing she thought about you. But Cheyenne had a deep sense of wonder. She could see herself in the stories that Kirsten told. She was mythic by nature, or had been. Kirsten couldn't seem to see anything in that side of her anymore. And there weren't federal aid programs for that. Hello, ma'am. Yes. Can you tell me which form I should fill out for a failure to have faith in the universe? It would be pages for sure. How long has it been since you last had faith in the universe? Have you tried finding faith in the universe in the past week? The parking garage that hired Kirsten charged her $35 for the shirt they gave her and told her they'd dock her if she didn't wear it. It would come out of her first paycheck, which would come after her third week of work. But none of the uniform shirts they had fit Kirsten, men in Indonesia not having large breasts. So she had to settle for one that came down to her thighs, and they suggested she buy two. On her first day, she put it on in the bathroom with plastic and creased like a Halloween costume. She came back to the office and her supervisor showed her how to fill out the time card and gave her a non-solicitation policy to sign. He rented her a flashlight and handed her a patch. Make sure you sew it on right here, he said, otherwise it looks fake. Fake like we're not really cops? Fake like your grievance process? She flipped through the employee manual. It would take 3 months to clear the probationary period and get the healthcare coverage. Then most of her check would go to covering the premium that didn't go to automatic basics. But it was better than bouncing on and off Medicaid every time the qualifications changed. And down the line, her new employer assured her this was a career. She wondered if they actually believed that. Leaving the office, Kirsten thought of her daughters. You don't like your myth? Well, I don't like the one I'm in either. Her stomach started to hurt. The bowl of oatmeal she'd made for breakfast was still full. She scraped it in the trash. It would take 3 months to get on the company's health plan, but once she was on, she would get all the tests. Between now and then, it was best to not have a record of stomach complaints, or at least not until she was off probation. So, thanks.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. And if you want to unmute yourself and say thank you, or you can throw something in the chat there.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Uh,
All right. I'm going to bring you back on here, Kesha.
Okay, sorry, I muted. I'm back.
Okay. Well, thank you both so much for reading. And we're going to do a little Q&A time. So to everyone listening, if you do have a question, you can go ahead and put it in the chat. And I'm going to start by asking a question. Both of the pieces you read tonight and your work in general does have a lot to do with women's rights and feminism. And so I was thinking about this first question has to do with having to capitulate to systems imposed by people who are not like us. Often my students in my writing classes come in thinking they have to write a particular way, thinking they have to follow certain standards and conventions that just aren't appropriate for them and don't work for them. And so the first question that I wanted to ask as other people think up their questions is, what are some things that you had to unlearn as a writer and disabuse yourself of as you became free enough to do what you do and to write what you write? And either of you are welcome to start. Kesha, it looks like you're ready to go. You want to start?
Yeah, yes, I'll go before my dog hops back in my lap. So, I think the story I read tonight is an example of me rebelling against that system, right? Choosing to tell a story in a way that it made sense in my head. When I talk, it's like my years in Nigeria show up when they do, and my years in the States. So my accent is always, I never know who's showing up. And sometimes my son will say, why do you go through 10 different accents in one conversation? But that's who I am. I can't do it any other way. And when I sit down to tell a story, I think that it has to show up for it to feel authentic. And when I decided to write Carrying Water, of course I could have written it in conventional English, right? But it didn't feel like the character in the story, Ronke, would speak that way. She's having a conversation with her daughter. I'm sorry, the granddaughter. So I hadn't clarified at the beginning that I was continuing a story where a Nigerian mother discovers that her 17-year-old daughter is pregnant and gives her the option of aborting or moving out. A child decides to move out and has the baby, and the struggles that ensue from that decision, right? Making that choice for herself and deciding really to create the kind of family that she wanted, even at the cost of losing her own mother and the security that she'd grown up with. That voice has to be there because I can't do it any other way. And this is an example of me speaking in the way that I grew up, right? I was raised in a house with an American mom and Nigerian dad, and we spoke a different language that mom didn't understand. And we grew up in a neighborhood where if you wanted friends, the first thing you would do is learn to speak their language. And so maybe the rebel in me just, shows up that way in my storytelling. Well, yes. Okay, that's the end. I should say the end.
Gosh, no, thank you. That's great.
Yeah, right.
I was trying to get my mic, my mute back on. Yeah, thank you so much, Kesha. Vanessa, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that makes so much sense. Everything Kesha said makes sense. I think a really healthy sense of, okay, so I came out of music initially. And one of the things I've noticed immediately when I started writing compared to playing music, rock music primarily, was that, in music, if you played someone a song you wrote or something like that, they didn't sit there like, fucking critic for the Times and then go like, well, I think you should have another verse there and then maybe do this. And I don't think the third line works. It was kind of like they didn't have the sense of ownership over your work in the same way to give you their opinion. And it's just like, I feel like there's so much, let me give you my opinion. And particularly for women, in different settings, right, is, oh, let me give you my opinion. And so from the beginning, like I had to put for myself, maybe because I was too insecure, maybe because of other things, I had to put a big fence around other people's opinions. And I know that's a strange thing to talk about in a writing, program, right? But there is a balance there about who you let in and who you don't and why and how you take it in. But I had to put a really big fence around it. And so, because I can't get caught into writing for you in the same, because, just so that I feel like I belong to somewhere, I have to really go into where I'm writing from, and I have to write for that person the person, I heard this from someone else, is one of the best things I ever heard. So I'm going to repeat it. It was I think Nancy Shepard, but I don't know. But she said, you're writing for the person who gets the joke. And that shifted something for me. And from that, I built on, you're writing for the person who knows why it's hard, knows why it's beautiful, knows why it's wrong. Right. And that gave me a sense of how to use voice in a different way. But I had to do a lot of like back off. So one of the things I learned how to do is like, oh, you're a writer. Can I read something you wrote? And I was like, if anybody wanted to read anything I wrote, unless it was somebody I really wanted their thoughts on, I would go, here, please feel free and read it, but I'm not looking for feedback and I'm not going to ask about it. I'm not looking for feedback. I would put that out immediately because I just found that people felt, completely comfortable just giving you tons of feedback. And I did not see that same thing. That ended up being very gendered. I just almost never saw it go, or very rarely saw it go in other ways. And I think that, so I found like I had to have real, to find the freedom of voice, to get away from expectations, to tell the story I wanted to tell it and not feel like I had to make it, look like Philip Roth. And yeah, I mean, so I'm going to really embarrass myself and take a risk here, Kesha, but can you describe and tell me if I'm thinking of this wrong? Do you, the man never quench? When you hear someone say man never quench, I had heard that years ago from a roommate I had. And it was one of those things that I heard it as, you never stop wanting, you never fill all your desires. You never, there's that kind of like, you know, and I kind of think that when you write, you want to stay on that edge a little bit, right? Like because that's the place of like hunger and contact in some sense. Am I using that correctly?
That's exactly accurate. Yes. Right. And I think you're right. If storytelling is your love, right. And if we're putting into context here, yes, that hunger has to be there. You know, man never quench means, you know, always thirsty is really the exact translation. But you're right that there's the constant search for your desires to make sense to you is the true meaning.
Yeah, and I think about that with character, right? Like when you're writing with voice, is that there's something that is just that propulsion. And I think it's hard to get at that propulsion in the same way if you're also trying to look over your shoulder for feed, you know, how do I look big in this picture? You know what I mean? Like there's a way that I found that hard. I see a question though that seems, Kesha, I don't know if you want to take it. How is it possible to encourage people to read your work? I have trouble enough getting feedback ever.
Mhm.
The thing I'll say, go on, Kesha, you go first.
No, I was going to say, well, so, you know, feedback is great, but it also terrifies me. I think depending on who it's coming from. I mean, you know, anyone in the Nigerian community that hears the title of my book, No God Like the Mother, you know, God is revered in this sense. And how dare you, Kesha, who are you? How dare you compare mere mothers to, you know, the Almighty? And you know, this book, yes, it is about relationships and the female experience in the world, but what is greater than the mother who, you know, is responsible for all of us being here? So in reverence to mothers, I chose that, but I was always told, and if I'm having a conversation with any Nigerian person, and I'm not saying all Nigerians feel this way, but the feedback, I mean, can you imagine if we haven't even gotten into the stories
Right.
past the title because I chose to use the word God in there. And so I think to answer your question, sorry, I ramble. I think you just have to ask for it. If feedback is something you want, I think you have to, you know, if it has to be someone that you trust, and you got to have the thick skin, because people will tell you exactly what they think. And sometimes they won't. They might tell you what they think you want to hear. And I think it really, you know, falls on you. What is it that you want? What do you want to get from the feedback that you're seeking? There's a question you have to ask yourself. I tend to encounter people who will say, I have your book, I haven't read it, please don't ask me any questions about it. And where I'm feeling safest, not even discussing it, unless I'm in a forum like this, you know, we don't need to talk about it. You know, because it is work. If we're at a bar and I'm 10 Jamesons in, don't bring up, not that I have, maybe 5, 6. But I don't, you know, that's not the space to discuss my work. But really the answer to your question is, you know what it is that you're seeking and the feedback that you're requesting from people, and then trust the persons that you're asking for it from.
I would add one thing that was really helpful to me on it. One, what Kesha just said about motive is really important. Like, are you really just looking for support, or you're looking for feedback? Those are different things. You're not going to get what you want if you know what you're, I mean, like, what are you looking for? Encouragement? Are you looking for company? Like, there's all sorts of ways. The other thing I found was that I I usually only have one or two people I share, that read my work that I ask for feedback from at certain stages. But what I did find was really helpful for me, if you can find someone who does this, like a friend, it usually has to be a friend. I have found that just having readers was helpful, right? So I have a friend who's a really, really big reader. I love how he reads. I love all the things he did. And I would just, like, in the beginning, when I did my first novel, I would like give him pages and we would not talk about it. It was weird, but it gave me the sense that I was giving someone. He would occasionally go, when's the next installment coming? And I would like give him more pages. Like, I don't think, every now and then I go, did you understand this? And he's like, yeah, or no. And I was like, other than that, we had no discussions. It was a strange thing, but I wasn't alone in it. So when you start to do longer works and you're not in a school setting or you're not in other things like that, being alone for a couple of years with something, if you do, it meant I wasn't alone with. So there's all different ways to be accompanied, but to know what you need. Do you what kind of feedback you need? Are you looking for encouragement? Also, you can also ask specifically, like, I'm wondering X. I found that to be the most useful feedback for me in general, was I'm wondering X, does that come through? So I think.
Sorry. I'm sorry. I hope I interrupted someone, but I was going to jump on what you said, Vanessa. I love and trust my husband, more than anyone. He understands the madness in this head. And, and I know that he looks forward to any opportunity where he can crush my soul. So that is my first go-to, person for feedback. So it really, and because I know he will be honest with me and gets that I need the honesty to get to where wherever it is that the story is taking me. So it really, knowing the person too, right? And knowing whether you trust them enough to crush your soul like my spouse.
Lovely. Well, thank you both. Josephine asks, always curious to know how often memoir seeps into your fiction and to what degree you try to hold it back.
Ooh, Vanessa, do you want to take that one, or you want me?
Yeah, I can sort of give my take on it. Memoir doesn't come in for me in the way, memoir to me is a narrative. Details come in all the time, right? Like, I've worked in a million restaurants. What I know about restaurants shows up in work. I've driven cab, it shows up in work. Like, I am very physical as a writer, so I need to know I've done it to try to know the physicality. Like in this book, there's a character who works on a tall ship for a period of time. So I had to go work on a tall ship because I didn't know how to physically embody those scenes without doing that. However, that's different than pulling in the storyline. I feel like that's the thing that people get confused sometimes about. And that's when you pull in the whole storyline, that's when I think it starts to feel like agenda. It's like you went to get a detail, but you had a story you wanted to tell and weren't telling, or you were being a little covert about it, and you pull the whole thing in. The whole storyline comes in with it. So now it's got a dynamic that's happening on its own. So it's not just a detail anymore or a setting. That's where it's slipping in. So I think there are other people who write very biographically, but I think that in most of the ones that I know, and Kesha, I'm curious what you have to say, they still have a very clear sense of, persona is persona, memoir is memoir. There are all different ways that people understand how they're forming a story. And so I think for me, I stay, I'm more interested in the details than my own emotional personal experience being brought in as narrative.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, right? What I might do is I'll find a moment in my life, right? That I did have an experience where I was 17 and I had to have a conversation with my Nigerian aunt where I had to make a decision: am I having this baby or moving out? And so taking just that one tidbit and then creating a completely different story from it. I do that sometimes because it's helpful for me to process my own experiences, right? And, you know, it's a good tool to decide if I was right or wrong in a situation. But I wouldn't say that that it happens often, but there are moments where, I might take in one of the stories from the book, when my children come jump in the bed while I'm sleeping, and when I wake up in the morning, that's how they wake me. I took that moment and created a different story from it. So that kind of thing happens all the time. And
Same
it's
for me.
usually because it's helpful as a jumping off point for me when I'm staring at a blank page and I don't know where to go. I'll just decide, well, Kevin's pissed me off again this morning. Kevin is my husband, sorry. And then I don't know, as an example, it depends on what I need in clearing my head when I'm facing that blank page.
So I think the thing, and Kesha, tell me what you think. I think the thing is that writers are much sketchier and carnivorous, and we're scavengers and we're opportunivores in ways that people don't realize. So you're taught, you grab something that's a moment that had something for you, but you're using it as something else. Like there's something that is, you're making worlds, right? And that's a messy, bloody process in some ways, but there's a scavenger nature to how you're using it, rather than a kind of like, I'm going to sneak this in here. Like there's something, I don't know. Kesha, what do you think about that idea?
No, it's exactly true. I think Justin wrote on there opportunivores.
Yes, opportunivores, exactly.
Yes, it's true. I've said I steal moments in people's lives and in my life too. Something happens that I think is interesting, or has revealed a thought in my head. I absolutely will hope that I remember, but we'll take notes for it. Because essentially storytelling is just watching human behavior and then translating it in the way that makes sense to you, and hoping that it makes sense to others. And if it doesn't, that's fine too. We'll survive. But I mean, I people watch. I go for walks, and I love meeting people for that reason, and walking through the forest and seeing absolutely no one for the reason of just absorbing the life around me, because I know there's a story in everything. I was in a workshop not too long ago, and someone asked about how it is that you get past the writer's block, and I said, I don't know that I believe in writer's block. I think it's you maybe being distracted by, or feeling overwhelmed by, a story that you want to create, instead of feeling, stories can start small. If I'm staring at my computer, but I can see out the window, and a leaf flutters, maybe that's inspiration. I think it's because we get overwhelmed by wanting to, knock the hell out of people with an incredible story and win all the awards and have Oprah show up, without realizing that really all you're doing is connecting with another person on the other end, right? A human being is going to read it. Just talk to them. There's the distractions fall away when you just decide to show up as a human and be present, while stealing moments from other people's lives. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as you give them credit where it's due. Listen, one of the stories in my book is about is a chapter from another book where I really share with the world about a time when my mother left me with drug dealers as collateral at 11 years old. And my mother has passed away, so she's not here to see it and to really disown me a second time. That is not funny. Justin. It's okay. We made up all, like, everything was great. I survived it. I promise. I'm standing here before you because I survived it. But things happen in our lives that that shape us. And I happen to be led to storytelling. So I use, more than just moments like that. I chose a big chunk of that time in my life where I learned a lot about my mother, a lot about the world, and the horrible people I was left with to guide me. But really, it made a fabulous story. Of course, 20, 30, 40 years later. So yeah, inspiration comes from almost anywhere for me. And I wouldn't say that I'm affected by writer's block anymore, because I do allow inspiration to come to me however it needs to.
I also think you have to be fearless. I think that's one thing you have to try to do as much as possible, is just be fearless. Because I can't tell you how many times I've been writing something, and I think this is really true now, but I've been writing something and it gets close to something that I'm like, oh, this is going to be really tricky to write about in this moment. And I just got, I have to get as close up to it as I can and live there, if that's part of the story. Now, I'm not talking about sort of contrarian stuff or like, arguments, but like where that can be a very intimate thing. It doesn't have to be like a political thing. It can be a very intimate thing, but I have to get wherever that thing is that starts to get really hard. And like, I don't want to tell that story. And maybe somebody, all those things, it's like, kind of got to move in. And then sometimes I'm like, I don't want to go there. Like, that's not the story I want to tell. If it's the story I want to tell, I'd be telling that story, but it's not, it's something to the side.
Yeah.
But that really fearless honesty, when I ever hit that, I also don't have writer's block and haven't. What I do have is what I think Kesha's talking about as well, is like, I can have anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
I can have anxiety usually when my head is very fast. I've got like hamster wheels in my head, like, and for those of you who don't know, in the 70s, because I'm 53, I just turned 53. There was this like plastic ball that they had gerbils, you could put a gerbil in, and it would just, the gerbil would run and run and run, but it was like these balls that would just float around the carpet, and they were called freedom balls. And I always think of that as my brain is like the freedom ball. I'm in my freedom ball and I'm running into things, and like, I'm not actually free, right? But when I'm in that state and I'm trying to write, there's too much, I'm trying to download too much to get it onto the page. And then it's just kind of, I get freaked out and stop. So it's just the making it small, like Kesha said, make it small, make it small, make it small. And also I found that like one line will get you in. One line.
Oh,
They're keys. Think
yeah.
about the key. And you find one when you're driving and one line gets you in, write it down and then go back and.
Yep. I'll add to that. Right. Every story I've ever written has started with one line, and it doesn't always end up as the very first line, but so I write them down. If it feels good, or I feel, that feeling, you'll know the feeling. If that feeling accompanies the thought, I think at least just note it in my phone. This poor thing is just stuffed with all the thoughts in my hamster wheel mind too, right? But put that one line down, and who knows where it's going to go. I never know. I mean, some of these characters, except for the story, that's really more about my relationship with my mother. The rest of them, I didn't know these people 5 years ago, 10 years ago. They show up and, demand you to, tell their story, and it's up to you to really lead the way, I think, is the best explanation for why it is that I do this and love this work so much.
Yeah.
Well, we're running out of time. Thank you both so much.
Bummer.
No. I wanted to leave time in case anybody had a question, maybe for you, Vanessa, about being at the house. But I wanted to. So if anybody does have a question about that, please. And if you have a question about the residency, go ahead and put it in the chat. But I did want to ask. Lots of students will watch this in the years to come. That's why we're recording it, and so what you've said tonight is just amazing for those students that'll be watching this. But I did want to ask you. You both followed non-conventional paths toward your writing. You've both done a lot of different kinds of work, and so at PCC, we have a lot of students who come to their education later in life, or are taking those non-conventional paths toward writing. And I wondered if you just had a piece of advice, maybe one piece of advice for our students at PCC who are trying to make it as writers, but also trying to survive and working all kinds of odd jobs and doing what they can. So if you have a piece of advice for them.
I'll say something very quickly because Vanessa, I want you to have the last word. I'm so sad that I'm not there partying with you. By the way, that's I feel like we would have a blast. I will say the one piece of advice that I will share is your story, who you are, does not have to resemble anyone else's. I as I shared tonight, I've had people step in for my mother and help raise me, but I feel I've been essentially on my own since I was very young. And I've had to make paths for myself where, there weren't any. And thank goodness for the community college system in this country, because it's more overwhelming to try to think of acquiring funds that I could have never even considered when I was, near homeless and wanting to go to school. And I have $30 or $40 or $50 that will buy one course versus trying to consider, 40, 50 grand for, a whole year of schooling. So my path was to consider what my options were, and the community colleges and the communities that I've lived in helped me sort through what it is that I wanted. I knew from a very young age that I wanted to tell stories. I didn't know how, but I knew I could take one class at a time, again, starting small, chipping away at it, and then one day getting to stand there and say, that thing I always wanted to do, I did it. And I did it my way. And that's okay too.
That's
Yay.
right.
Right.
That's great. I love
Also,
it.
thanks, Van, for being a supporter in the early days. Okay. All right, Vanessa, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm gonna say something, and I feel like I need to have a disclaimer for half the time I talk, but I'm gonna have a disclaimer that says this is just my opinion, and I'm not, because you're asking me honest advice,
Yeah.
and and I'm gonna give you my honest answer that I would give. That's not,
Fantastic.
Okay. I feel very strongly about community colleges. I think they are just more critical than any other educational base in our country for citizens and for thinkers. I find creative writing programs with community colleges provide a infinitely better level of storytelling and talent than the MFA programs around the country or many other settings. And I would say that, in terms of making your living as a writer, stay away from the MFA programs. Unless you are paid 100% and you know exactly what you want to do and you are on fucking track to do it and you just need this or that, most of them, they will, I have, if you were in a community college and you are going to have to balance work and you're going to have to, I went to try to do an MFA program for 2 months and then it was like the most horrific experience of my life. And I bailed on it, went back to driving cab. But my thinking at the time was something I think a lot of people here could have, which is, well, like I'll do this and I'll get a stipend and I'll get some time, but those programs don't give you time. They take your time. Most of those programs don't give you writing time. You spend all your time waiting to when you're going to get a writing and you turn in 10 pages and you go through this thing and you're reading all these other people's stuff. And it's like, they can be fun. They can be bonding. You can make it work if you have to. But my God, the best advice I could give anybody is write and work, right? Like just write and work and figure out what you care about, because learning how to write it follows directly on from having an understanding about what you find beautiful or wrong or clear or, trying to put words into something. You are all going to have more to say in a more original way than what is put into those systems. And I'll tell you, I have a friend of mine who taught at Reed. I love him dearly. And he told me one day, because I was much younger at the time, and I was like, I should go get an MFA. I should go do this. And he was like, Vanessa, do you see this? And he said, I'm going on sabbatical. And he said, we have 800 submissions for my job while I'm gone. And he said, the first thing I do basically is, he said, I sit down and, you just pick everyone off the top. They all have the same thing. And she said, we just go Iowa, 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 and throw them into a pile. He said, because they all sound the same. So I'm being very blunt and very, like, there are good MFA programs. There are good, but if you go to one, like the low residency ones, the problem is there's no funding for them a lot of time, right? Like they can go with work, but then they're hard to get into. So if you can get into one and they pay you enough to live on it, and you can sort of like keep your head down and just keep writing, but don't make it the thing you need to do to be a writer. Like I worked so many jobs and, like I was I was on my own very young too. I had to make a lot of different decisions. I fucked up a lot of things in my life and I've put a lot of things together in my life. And like, just those things are more valuable. I mean, like, I hate when I see people and I see their hearts are big and they're looking at how to like make it. And the other thing is they jump right into teaching. And I'll tell you, it is very hard to teach and write. It is very, very hard. So you can get in this thing with writers where, so jump into teaching if you love teaching, right? But do you know what I mean? Like you can get into this thing where like, you're constantly saying, if I can just get X, then I'll be able to write. But you can write right now. And like writing right now is what changes all of that. And so, yeah, that's and then, working jobs, here's the thing. Number one thing I tell people who ever ask me about learning your process and owning your process is the most important thing you're ever going to have in terms of being able to write, to know what makes it work for you. So that takes some experimentation. So I like to write in the first 6 hours that I wake up. I don't work when I can. I don't work jobs in the day. I worked a lot of shift work at night and in the evenings because I want to get up and write. And then I could go wait tables, right? Whatever else I was doing. When I little kids, changes. Different options, different things come up to me. So there's a flexibility that you learn from writing where you are that you don't learn being in a program. And so, yeah, just don't wait to write. That's my.
That's what a great point, Vanessa. I was just going to say, there's a time when I had no friends, but I could read. There were books around me all the time. So my friends showed up in books and I learned really how to write because I read so much as a little girl, as a teenager who really was not getting any friends, and was not allowed out of the house when I did have a roof over my head. So sad again. But reading a ton, finding the time to write, best advice. And the rest of it just kind of falls into place depending on how much you love it too. I start every day. I drop the children off to school. I come back, I walk the dog. I come back home, walk the second dog because they can't be walked together because they're both so mean. And then when I finally have a cup of coffee and I sit in front of the computer, I get that feeling. I open the laptop, it's there. I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Right.
If you're not feeling that your body will tell you.
Yes. And process, you have to love the process, not the end. Meaning, like, if you're sitting down and writing isn't bringing you joy, I mean, we all have hard times, but like, if the process of it doesn't give you that feeling, you may want to write a great book and have good ideas, but that may not be what you're called to do. Like, you got to love that process enough to do it. Otherwise, it's just like torture.
Yeah. Gosh.
Sorry if I was.
No, this has been wonderful.
Too much. I just really wanted to put out
No.
There are good ones. There are good people who have great experiences. I just,
Yeah, you'll be on the news tomorrow, Vanessa.
So appreciate your honesty.
All right, thanks, Justin, so much.
Yeah, thank you both so much. And feel free to unmute yourself and say thank you if you'd like. And thank you also to Andrea and Emily for interpreting for us tonight.
Thank you. Yeah.
And thank you all for coming.